No, you gotta press the button to stop. Oh, the light's on. Oh, is it? Yeah. How's that? Hey, could you adjust? Is this working?
Yes, it's working.
Apologies, everybody. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Rose, as you know, and I'm honoured to be an ambassador for the Plastic Waste Partnership. And this is a really key session today. It's organised by the European Investigation Agency. Trading in plastics, the routine exploitation of Basel Convention rules by waste criminals. And this is a key event for all of us, and especially for those of us that were here in 2019. You know, we must all remember that great moment when the Basel Convention signed in the enhancement of the transboundary regulations on plastic waste and the whole prior informed consent. And shortly thereafter, we all saw in the news a whole bunch of containers that were sent back to their origins. And I was thinking, wow, we've really cracked it. But quite rightly, we haven't. And as the team behind me will show us, that there's still an enormous amount of illegal trade for plastic waste. In case you haven't read it, go on to the European Investigation Agency website and have a quick look at their report, The Truth Behind the Trash. I just spent 5-10 minutes flicking through it, and it's quite the eye-opener. And I would say that this leads us to think about environmental law, ecocide, the whole push that continues between wealthy countries and countries with not such robust economies, and all the corruption that fits with it. So this is a very important session. I'm very pleased you came. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Tim Grabiel from the European Environmental Investigation. Environmental Investigation, sorry. We have Gail Rotelia from the European Commission, Semir Ghali, nice to meet you, Semir, from IPEN. And this session is being moderated by my friend Griffins O'Jay, who will take us through the session. So thanks very much for coming, and over to you, Griffins.
Thank you very much, Ross. Good evening, or good, I think it's evening already. Good evening, everyone. Very much welcome to this event, and thank you very much for being here. So we will start off, and I just want to give you a little bit of background. So since the records began in 1998, over 250 million tons of plastic waste have been shipped around the world. But because of misdeclaration, legal loopholes, unclear custom codes, and lack of enforcement, this number is likely a significant underestimate. Sadly, waste crime is seen as a high-profit, low-risk business model with low likelihood of prosecution. In the EU alone, the illegal waste market is estimated to be worth 15 billion euros and is only projected to continue increasing. On 1st January 2021, the Basel Amendment entered into force, meaning that the Y48 shipment of waste, dirty and mixed plastic waste, can only be exported to a non-OECD country subject to prior informed procedure. However, trade data, prosecutions, and first-hand evidence in receiving countries shows that illegal trade continues unabated. Joining us to explore this, why this is still the case, are still three distinguished panelists, as has been introduced by Ross. We have Tim Grabiel, Gael, and Semir. I want to begin with Tim. Tim from the Environmental Investigation Agency. He will give us a brief presentation on their recent report, Truth Behind Trash, which has already analyzed available data and information on the trade in plastic waste to give most comprehensive picture to date of this worsening issue. Thank you very much, Tim, and over to you.
Thank you. Mic check. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. Could we put the first slide? I guess I'll just start by reintroducing myself. My name is Tim Grabiel. I'm with the Environmental Investigation Agency, where I'm a senior lawyer and policy advisor, and have been working on the plastic issue at the international level for a number of years now. And we're waiting for the presentation to come up.
Moving, please. Yeah, it's
Is it there? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. I have the pleasure of introducing, albeit briefly, our report, The Truth Behind Trash. We released it in September 2021, and it looks at the scale and impacts of the international trade in plastic waste. There you have the cover on the left-hand side. We don't have any copies available at the moment, unfortunately, at least the hard copies, but you can go to our website and download it quite easily. And if you put the truth behind trash into Google, it's the first thing that pops up. So that helps you. On our right, I'd like to just start off with a slide on plastic waste exports and how they have evolved over time. What you're seeing is total waste exports of plastic waste since 1992. In the aggregate, as Griffins has mentioned, 250 million metric tons have been traded. Oh, the video. Yes, hold on. Well, yes, could you minimize the online people? Yeah. And then we'll go back on the previous slide. Yes, this slide. Thank you very much. So the little blue columns are represents the plastic waste exports, and as you can see, they increase over time until about late 2017, 2018, when we have the China ban. The national sword policy came into effect, and that banned the imports of plastic waste into China. What happened then, what ensued then, was significant market disruption in trade flows, and it resulted in containers being abandoned or left at port, as well as redirection to countries in Asia, such as Malaysia and Vietnam, as well as Turkey. Following that, we had COVID. We are updating this graph shortly, and we expect to see a bounce back to previous levels in plastic waste exports when we do. The global plastic waste trade market is remarkably complex. On our right, we have a diagram that shows some of its complexity. There we outline the actors and the pathways from plastic waste generation to disposal. There are many actors implicated in this, in any given pathway. They include local governments, private waste carriers, material recovery facilities or MRFs, waste brokers, freight forwarders, port authorities, reprocessing facilities, to name a few. And this complexity helps to create the enabling environment for illegal trade, for exploitation of a complex system. Because the bottom line is making plastic waste disappear is a lucrative business, primarily because it avoids the costs associated with legitimate treatment and disposal. And we have seen over time, increasingly, criminal networks getting involved in the plastic waste trade, which is a troubling sign. So the main methods to smuggle plastic waste are threefold. The first is concealment. This involves hiding plastic waste behind a layer of clean, baled plastics or other materials. I think we've all seen images of ISO containers that have been opened with the front being well-organized plastic that has been baled, and behind it has been all the other stuff that was being illegally shipped. The second is misdeclaration, and this involves falsely declaring the contents of the shipment. For example, it may involve declaring contaminated, non-recyclable, or mixed plastic waste as sorted and non-hazardous in the hopes of avoiding inspection. The third method is transshipment. This involves shipping plastic waste via circuitous routes using a series of ports and potentially carriers to mask the country of origin, the shipper, the consignee, or the final destination. There is an acute lack of transparency and accountability on plastic waste trade. This comes along with limitations to inspection and enforcement. And there we have the environment that is ripe for illegal trade to occur. In the final two slides, I'd like to show some graphs to get at some specific points I'd like to make. This graph charts total plastic production and plastic waste exports over time. As you can see, there's a direct correlation between plastic production and exports. As exports have grown, so too has illegal activity. And what it underscores is that the high income, high consuming countries, the ones that are the major exporters of plastic waste, this includes countries such as the US, Japan, and Germany, are not able or capable of managing the plastic that they consume and have therefore increasingly relied on exports. This last slide compares production to population growth. the next two. That grayish line is plastic production since 1990. We have seen a sorry. That grayish line is population since 1990. It has increased 47% to today. That red line represents plastic production. And there we have seen an increase of 329%. What this underscores is that plastic consumption and production is not necessarily related to population growth. What we're witnessing is higher consumption patterns on the part of people over time that have led to such significant increases. So it dispels the myth to a certain extent that population growth is responsible for the increase in production. It actually is our consumption habits that's driving the increases in plastic production. And with that, I will end the presentation and look forward to the ensuing discussion.
Thank you very much. For that, Thank you. It's good. Thank you very much, team, for that insightful presentation. And I could take some highlights. For example, the criminality driven by factors like concealment, among others. And also the correlation, as you mentioned, that it's not really based on the population growth, consumption that is driving this issue of plastic trade and among others. And I would want to ask Semias, and your reflection, having worked with you for many years, and the fight that we had on the issue of illegal and criminality on the issue of plastic export, the recent case that you had in Tunisia. Would you give some reflection on the presentation by team? Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Gavies. Good evening. Thank you, team. Exactly. So we get the recent problem in Tunisia. So it is the illegal transport of plastic waste and plastic waste. It was for post-industrial export, but by this we get really a mixture of waste from municipalities, hospital, a lot of mixture. So, as mentioned, so the lack of transparency. If we point to the lack of transparency. Why we have this lack of transparency? Because if we go to the codes, the customs codes, so we find that this is one of the reasons that make this a lack of transparency. For example, the waste entered in Tunisia from Italy was under 3825 customs code. What is assigned this 3825? It is for residual products of the chemical or allied industries, not elsewhere specified or included. Municipal waste, sewage sludge, other residual products. So nothing transparent, even from the code. And this is allowed so to export, so the legal to be illegal. That's one. The second point, so if we go to, for example, to the Interpol report, the last Interpol report, so it is related, so this kind of export is related to criminal platforms. And that's why we have there are a lot of corruptions, and we can see that official papers are really, so they play with the official paper. So that's case that we get in Tunisia. So it was a big fight for 2 years, and really, so finally in last February, so it was returned to the original country, but really, so what we don't understand that we have this problem of plastic in over the world, and it is like fighting, but at the same time, we get, for example, from developed countries coming to our countries to sign investment on plastic. So, in one hand, they declare that there are a problem, but on the other hand, they come in our countries and we get this, for example, in 2019-20. So from France, they came to Tunisia to sign with our industry also to sign on plastic industries. So to increase the production of plastic. So really, we are in a way that we don't know where we are. So in one time, so they claim that there are a lot of plastic. We would like so to stop, but behind the sea, there are a lot of other things. So I think from my point of view as an environmentalist specialized, so we have to point the source of the problem. And one of the source of the problem is to tackle the customs codes, where this is one example, but just enter the UN country, just put the word waste, and you will see a list of waste that we don't know what kind of waste.
Thank you very much, Semia, for that reflection. And what comes out the issue of HS codes as one of gaps or challenges in terms of what you see as increasingly the case of illegal trade in plastic waste. So, and also lack of transparency, which is, thanks for highlighting these challenges. And with that, I want to come to the panelists again with specific questions that you may respond to. And I will start with you, Tim, if you may answer. We've seen, increasingly, we have seen high-income, high-level consuming countries exporting more plastic waste due to a lack of capacity to manage it, either at home, in a legally, socially, and environmentally responsible manner. How do you view the issue of waste crime in the context of broader patterns of production and consumption of plastic across the society? It is also one of the things that was in the presentation.
At the risk of repeating myself a bit, but with a different take. The plastic waste, the problem that we have with plastic waste exports and the associated problems that we will have as long as we have plastic waste exports with associated problems with illegal trade are entirely linked to our overproduction and consumption. The problem with overproduction and consumption is it provides cheap plastic that undermines various other interventions or activities that we might otherwise take further downstream. So, for example, if we have overproduction of plastic production and consumption, we do not ensure the efficient use of plastic that we do need to use. And we do not eliminate efficiencies in the system, resulting in more plastic waste. We do not incentivize the replacement of single-use plastics and packaging in favor of reusable alternatives or alternative delivery systems, which then further exacerbates the problem of plastic waste. And we do not promote secondary markets for recyclates, which we do not encourage the economies necessary to make them profitable by putting cheap plastic on the market constantly. And so it's intimately linked with our production and consumption, and we have to see it in that light. The actions that we take to prevent plastic use is intimately related to what we're trying to achieve here at the Basel Convention, which is to reduce plastic waste exports, bring transparency to it, and ensure proper treatment when we do ship it abroad. So that's how I would see it.
Thank you very much, Tim, for that reflection. And we talk about the issue of incentives as well as the issue of efficiency, which I think are very key concept or issues or drivers that are very important concept to look at in addressing this problem. And I want to also come to you, Gael, on the same question. If you may, how do you view the issue of waste crime in the context of broader patterns of production and consumption? Just the same question, if you may reflect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gael Derotalia at the European Commission. On this question about the drivers for the problem that's been exposed by Tim and and what is being done basically at the European level, I think there has been sort of a wake-up call a few years ago where plastics really become much higher on the political agenda than it used to be. And that was the case at the European level and also at the international level, as we have seen notably at the last Basel conference of the party. And that has led notably the European Union to develop what we believe is a very ambitious agenda precisely to tackle the whole facet of the plastics issue and the plastic pollution. And a lot of the issues that were mentioned by Tim as these drivers, I mean, we are trying to tackle them in an as comprehensive manner as possible. So you've mentioned a number of these issues, like on the lack of on the overproduction first, on the problem of single-use plastics, and that the EU has adopted a specific legislation on single-use plastic, which includes a banning on the placing on the market of a number of these most used single-use plastics that were found on the beach. And building on that, we are developing other legislation. I mean, I'm from the European Commission, so a bit our core business is to develop legislation and then, of course, looking after the implementation. But building on what has been done on single-use plastic, now the European Commission will be coming up with a proposal on packaging at the end of this year, which is also has the same ambition of a complete revamp of the current legislation, precisely to ensure that what you are putting on the market as packaging is easier to reuse, recycle, also use recyclates, as you mentioned, the recycled content. That's also something that we're working with a very high ambition about. And also thinking about whether, some alternatives which are much more environmental friendly than plastics can be used for packaging. So these are just a few examples, but there are many other initiatives which are trying to tackle these drivers of the problem, so that we do not find ourselves in a situation where, indeed, as you've seen in the graphs, there used to be more and more export of plastic waste from the European Union to third countries, precisely because we didn't know what to do in Europe with it. And then what is also happening together with this change in the legislation is also changing in the business. There's more and more recycling capacity being developed, and new markets are being developed, which is also a good sign that circular economy can deal with this problem more and more and come to grip with it more and more. So there are a lot of initiatives in there which are happening to try to address that problem. And now, I mean, I've addressed this part of the problem, and then what we've seen is the illegal trades, the mechanism which allows this illegal trafficking to happen as well. And on that front as well, we have developed quite an ambitious strategy to address this shipment of plastic waste, which should not cause serious environmental harms to the countries where they end up to. So I'm happy to talk about it as well now or a bit later on, depending on how you want to schedule the answer.
Thank you so much for that. Actually, we'll be able to come back on that so that you can be able to elaborate more. And I think what comes up is that there's some leadership in the EU within the EU to address the issue by policy changes, which perhaps will be good examples that can be taken up by other regions. And now I want to come back to you, Semi, again on the same question. You addressed the aspect of illegal, the illegal shipments, but on the same question, this waste crime in the context of broader production and consumption. Do you have some, across the society, what you even see in your country, do you have some reflection on the same question, the issue of consumption and production?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we are considered as developing countries, and there is another layer so that we have to look at. It is the economic issues. So the economic issues that, because now we have a lot of parameters that can impact. So the strategy, perhaps, if they would like, so to go more, so to decrease the use of plastic, but at the same time you have this unemployment. So after the COVID crisis, so that's why even you would like to make the pressure, whatever you would like to make the pressure to decrease, but you have the plastic industries, they will say, oh, so you have your economy, so this will impact your economy, and we will close, we will have some employed, so they will be taken away. So that's also, it is a very important aspect that we have consider. So how we can be sustained, but at the same time, so to keep the economy working and the incomes of the population also. The other point, so in reflection of what I said, we see also that whenever so EU, because we are the neighbor of EU, whenever we see that they close the tap on the EU, so and because we are developed countries, it's not only Tunisia, but we are at the top of the continent of Africa, but even for the other countries. So they try to go and to profit from the economic crisis and to create the business in our countries. So sometimes even we see that that the not clean industries coming from EU, so to be based in our countries. So that's something, because we within this frame, when we have to make a decision, it is a decision for all. It is not only for one continent, it is for all, because whatever the environment is like open for all. And as I mentioned before, so whenever they export for us like something not clean, so we have the same Mediterranean Sea, so it will go to return back to the continent. So that's why we have to get the global integrated reflections, and for that, so we see that our work on the ground, so that means people would like so to change their conceptions about the plastic. They realize that they would like to change, but sometimes they are like out of the decision. The market is plenty of plastic. The design is attractive, so for the youth, they play on many aspects. Well, that's why we have like to tackle many aspects at the same time to decrease. See, for example, the water in the bottle. So they create as much as we can. Tunisia is a big consumer of water in the bottle. However, we can have the tap water, but they don't do as much. So the industries, they don't like prefer to do as much on the tap water. So to analyze and to keep it like running on plastic bottle. So we face but I think the main element which is very important in the country is how to raise the consumers about the plastic, and that's when they are aware, they will change, and they will make the pressure on industries to change, because they will not buy their products. So that's why. So it is a mixture, really, a mixture of problems and conflicts.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those reflections. You're bringing out how the issues, particularly the generation like the youth, among other dynamics, demographics. So that is very interesting dynamic. And because of time, I think we want to go to the next question, just for your reflection. So I come to you, Tim. Given your experience and everything we have discussed today, and even the presentation that has been done, what would be your top recommendations for policy improvement to reduce illegal trade? We have one of the agenda items in this scope around the issue of illegal trade. So what would be your top recommendations on that?
Hello. It's a good question. I'll start off by just noting that we will fail here if we do not address the problem further upstream. And we have a process that's underway, that's taking place with this negotiation for a new global agreement on plastic pollution. And so if there are any parties here and those who are influential in that space, I think it's an absolute priority that we support that effort and ambitious agreement. But within the context of Basel and what we could do here to help address the problem of trafficking, I have a few recommendations, and they draw from things that the Basel Convention can do. And the first one I'd like to see is we should have prior informed consent for all plastic waste. I think when we adopted the amendments in 2019, we sliced and diced plastic waste in a way that in hindsight may not have been the best way to address the issue. Because what we've done is we've created certain streams that can be freely traded easily without PIC. And then we have created others that do require PIC. And in that regard, we've created an enabling environment. Legal trade enables illegal trade. And so we could bring transparency to all plastic waste exports, the transboundary movements of plastic waste, by eliminating the exceptions that we see. So that would be one concrete thing that the Basel Convention can do, and I think is very much aligned with the need for transparency on this issue. Another thing would be to enhance our understanding and our ability to monitor the chain of custody. I know there's been some work on creating certification schemes so that we can track plastic waste from origin to destination, because again, it's a very complex system. There are a lot of actors. Some are just names on paper, other ones are handling it for them. It's a ecosystem ripe for abuse. And without having some sort of chain of custody certification ability to be able to track it, we put ourselves at a disadvantage to illegal traders. And I think it's also important for those that are, trying to get rid of their waste, but want to be responsible about it. We talk to a lot of people that collect plastic and sort plastic, and then they pass it on, but they have no idea where it's going, other than the representations of the waste broker. And so they're not able to actually track the waste. And this has led to some even putting trackers in bales so they can see the final destination. But they shouldn't have to do that, because there's a lot of good faith actors out there, and we just need to control the bad faith ones. So that would be another recommendation. I'd also like to see us entertain restrictions on transshipments. We could think about restricting the number of customs offices that would be able to approve transshipments, so that we could have greater clarity on the number, any changes that are made to them when they're en route. We could have competent authorities that can be very competent on a particular issue. But I think redirecting transshipments to a few isolated custom offices would help us be able to identify abuses in transshipments for illegal plastic waste. I'd also like to see further guidance given to countries on when plastic waste exhibits Annex 3 characteristics. It's really hard for customs authorities to know when any given plastic waste might potentially have some hazardous or harmful impacts. And there's no guidance on it that's forthcoming. And I've heard from governments that this creates challenges to actually implementing that part of the Basel Convention. So if we could identify certain types of plastic or polymers that create greater risk, and in that way we could help inform the inspection and enforcement and rejection by customs authorities of these problematic waste streams. So there you go. Those are 4 recommendations.
Thank you very much. Very concise and well elaborated. That I think, as we discussed, I think the parties that are here in the room will be able to pick up for addressing this issue within this context of the Basel Convention. So thank you very much, team, for that. I come to you, Gael, for your reflection that you just mentioned the work that is going on in the EU. If you may just give some concrete or the top priority recommendations for policy improvement along the same lines we talked about. Thank you, to address the illegal trade.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, what I wanted to say is to give you 3 examples about what actually the EU is doing to address the problem of shipment of waste and specifically plastic waste outside the EU. And the first one, what we can do is come up with stricter rules on the export. And then that's very much what we are now making up. As we speak, actually, there are new rules which are being discussed with the European Parliament and the EU member states, precisely with the aim to make it stricter, to make this rule stricter about what you can ship, what kind of waste you can ship to which country. And the starting point that we have today in the EU, we are implementing the Basel Convention, we are implementing the Basel ban. This means we are prohibiting the export of hazardous waste outside the OECD, and we are even going a bit beyond the Basel ban in the sense that the waste which are in the Basel Convention, but which are not hazardous waste, like plastic waste the mixed plastic waste, which we are including in the Basel Convention at Alaska. We are also in the EU prohibiting the export of such waste to non-OECD countries. But the experience has shown that it is not enough. And one of the reasons is that what the wastes which are not covered by the Basel Convention big procedure or prohibition, so what we call the green listed wastes, they are also creating a lot of challenges when they are exported outside the EU, especially to developing countries. And that has been very much a starting point for the European Commission proposing new rules, which are, again, currently being discussed, and the basics for this proposal is to say, okay, the export of any waste outside the OECD would only take place if the authorities of the country concerned, so let's take Tunisia as an example. If the Tunisian authorities come to the European Commission and say, we want to import this and that type of waste, and we are able to recover it in a sustainable manner, and we are giving you the evidence for that. And then that we are setting out the criteria in the legislation, and only if this evidence comes, first, well, this evidence comes and the country really proactively comes and contacts the Commission, and then the Commission would assess this information and come to the conclusion that yes, it can be shaped in this and dealt with a sustainable manner. Only in that condition would the export of this green listed waste, so the one which are not yet covered by the Basel Convention, be allowed to take place. So that's one of the pillar of our proposal, which is currently being discussed. So we'll see if this is adopted, but that's very much the hope that we have in the European Commission. In addition to this, we are also proposing that the EU companies which are exporting waste should also have a solid independent audit of the facilities where they're shipping the waste, to also ensure that these facilities in certain countries are dealing with it in a sustainable manner. And again, we are setting up a number of criteria in the legislation to ensure that this is the case. So that's the first part, setting up stricter rules. Now you will be saying rules are nice, they need to be enforced. So this is the second pillar. We are also trying to reinforce the enforcement side of the enforcement of those rules. Just to clarify, at the EU level, we don't have a police, we don't have a customs, so you don't have an EU custom officer or EU police at the port. These are the customs from the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, but we are trying to foster much better cooperation between them. Also trying to have a bit of the possibility for the EU anti-fraud office, which is normally dealing with other type of fraud, to get engaged in this kind of issue on waste trafficking, so that we have a better grip as well on the enforcement side. And also looking a bit at the transparency, the HS code that you mentioned, or the chain of custody, so that we get some more clarity and action in that regard, and that is supported by EU. And finally, the third one is working with our international partners. So these can be countries in third countries, civil society organizations, which have a very important role also in alerting on what is happening well or less well, which is often what they do, and that's very useful for us as well. And with international organization, and also having this ambitious agenda as well in the Basel Convention or in the Plastic Treaty, so that we can really put up front these priorities, not just for ourselves, but also share it with others. And then there are different examples. For example, later this week, there will be a side event here on a project which is funded by the European Union with the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, between the EU and countries from the ASEAN region, and that also is showcasing what the EU can do as concrete as possible to help out cooperation between these two regions. So yeah, these are just the examples I wanted to mention.
Thank you so much. It looks like a lot of work going on, and as we just mentioned, the enforcement and the issues of the new laws and among others is critical, particularly enforcement. We have the ban amendments among others. So thank you very much for the effort you're doing on the same. So last but not least, before I come to the audience for any burning questions, I would like to give you Semia to close on your top recommendation for improvement in terms of policy. If you have any reflection on that, having given your experience and what you've witnessed in your country.
Yes, thank you. So I think as I mentioned, so we have to resolve the main source of the problem. So because in our developing countries, so the first frontier, so to enter this kind of illegal trade, it is that the customs. So that's why we have to regulate and to have the transparency on the HS goods. As I mentioned, so we have this I can, personally, I cannot accept that in the HS codes you have and others. What is that others? So that's really, so it's not transparency. So that means it is legal to have the illegal. So that's something, it is really, so we have, I would like so to see in this frame in BRS, so to see the customs representatives, so the people that represent the international organization, so what they will do, how they will work on that. So, and we would like, so even for the here in BRS, to see also all the chemicals like listed, so to be like assigned with their HS code, so we can have this traffic, we can have this like traceability. So that's a point. The second, I think also that's what we did from Tunisia. So I don't know if they do that. So when you have to export something, so just take a photo, the real photo of this product. So then when it is not that, so like because the customs are not in general, they look at the edge and they are not specialized in many things. And when you go to the list, it is really a huge list of products. So I think this is for the traceability. So we have to work also on the system, international system for traceability of this traffic. That's the last point that we face. So the problem of donation. So the donation, it is like legal, but after that it will be illegal. So for example, we get the case in developing countries. So the computer before the end of their life, so they send it to the developing countries to finish their life in hours. So it is legal, but at the end we find ourselves with this plastic and illegal, so and toxic. So that's a lot of corrupted ways. So we have like to tackle, so to avoid the problem for our countries, because we cannot manage already our waste, our plastic. We are fighting for that. So how to have more from other countries? So that's things. So we have to work together, and we have really so each we have to see where we are, how we advance really, and how we get for the developing countries so more advanced. So I think that's should be really done. So to see really indicators that we are like tackling the problems from a top to a top. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reflection, and thank you to the panelists for all this. As we almost come to the close, however, before we close, I would like to perhaps check on the audience if there's any burning question that you may want to pose to the panelists. I see 2 hands, so I'll pass the mic.
So I have a question. Over the past few sessions, we hear about the past data or data that's been collected over the past couple of centuries that have to do, decades that have to do with plastics and the life of plastics. And then we're hearing how future solutions want to be implemented, whether it's through regulation, policy, limiting use, putting in traceability. But I have a question of what are your recommendations for the present plastics that have been produced till today? So if we address the present scenario of all the plastics that we've produced till date, how can we treat them in a better manner? How can we move them in a safer manner? Because more countries are fortunate than others, or some countries are more fortunate than others. Capacity is not everywhere in order to take in plastics and recycle them. So how can the conventions help address the current supply of plastics that has been created till today and that are filling countries and landfills, and the photos that we saw in the plastics forum that are hung right across the entrance? How can we solve it today? Not policies and treaties that will be sealed or agreed upon over the next few years. So that's my question to the panelists.
Thank you so much. So we'll take the last one. I saw another hand at the back before we have a reflection and the close
Hi, Costas Veles, University of Leeds. Thank you for your very interesting insights. I wonder how we could, how we see the role of all this new legislation and regulation and enforcement efforts that are pending at EU level or at international OECD or any other level. How we see the impact on the legitimate trade. If we are to implement a circular economy, the only way to do it is on a globalized economy, and this has been the case for decades, even for hundreds of years for things like paper. So I wonder, as we tighten up regulations, what is going to be the impact on legitimate trade and how we can enable the legitimate trade? As you know, for example, the proximity and self-sufficiency principle never applied to recyclates under the Waste Framework Directive at the European Union, to give you a high-level overarching approach to that. So are we going to totally reverse this approach and then go to a totally different world? It would be very much interesting to hear your insights. Thank you.
Maybe before you give it, maybe could you just introduce yourself, or you did? Okay, maybe yeah.
I'm just the microphone bearer.
My name is Benjamin Mansouri. I'm from the UAE and I work at Rebound Limited.
Okay, thank you. So the panelists can easily, address you. So anyone who wants to reflect on the questions? Yeah, I've just noted.
So I think I'm trying to respond. So this is really the work, because there are, for the plastic, there are a lot of toxic additives. So that's one of the problems. So with these additives, so then they will reach the circular economy, and we will get so toxicities for the other productions. So that's one. That means this is here. So to tackle this kind of problems, there are a big list of chemicals used for plastic, and daily we are facing this really very harmful list of chemicals. So that's one. So, and this is for that. So should be the industry's platform should be aware about and working on alternatives. So, but safe alternatives, because as we are seeing that 10 years ago, we said that this list of chemicals are really harmful, but they are changed by alternatives. And after 10 years, we find that their alternatives is also harmful. So that's things that we are facing really. So today, we have the engineering chemistry so over the world. That means we know that if it is really harmful or not, because whenever we do research, so we have to do the toxicities, the ecotoxicity, even on humans. So we know on the genetics, on all these elements. So that's why the industries should really be engaged with this platform to go for like a safe additives. Then we start from that, and then we can try to resolve the others.
I know we are pressed of time because of other events coming up, but there was a question at the back on the issue of these laws. Anyone wants to reflect on that?
If I understood correctly, it was a question regarding whether we're going to be undermining the circular economy if we limit plastic waste trade. Did I capture that accurately, more or less? And I just want to note that only 9% of all plastic ever produced has been recycled. And we have serious limitations on recycling plastics because of the way that they are designed. The circular economy is a much more robust effort than just moving plastic waste to potential facilities that could engage in their recycling. It requires a life cycle approach from product design on down to be able to truly have that circularity that we seek. I see restrictions or the restrictions on the plastic waste trade as helping to foster responsibility for the plastic that we generate. I see the plastic waste trade as an easy way out of exporting a problem that we cannot deal with internally because we have not created the waste management systems and we did not control the products that are being put on the market. So I actually see it as being very complementary towards the effort on circularity. And it's very rare that we need to send plastics to far-flung places because they have recycling facilities that we don't have in our own borders. There's very few polymers where that's the case. Mostly what we're doing is we're sending stuff that we just don't want to deal with. So I see them as quite sort of pushing towards the same direction, just from my perspective. And then to the question about what we could do now, I think part of the problem is we're not doing enough, and the rules and the regulations on the books are not sufficient, and that's why we're encountering this. But I mean, if we were to try and do something overnight, I think it would be talking with our industries about the plastics they're putting on the market. It would be inspection and enforcement of the existing obligations, and then it would be really setting into action the measures and policies we need to shore up the gaps that we have, because they're significant. I think that's why we're all here. That's why we're going to negotiate a whole new treaty, is because the status quo is not satisfactory.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. I want to thank the panelists for their time and the presentations and reflections. So thank you all for joining us today. I also want to thank the audience for your engagement and listening and for coming. So because of time, I want us to give a round of applause to all of us for this. Yes, thank you so much. And our team will be here. So if you have any question, I mean, you can be able to maybe have a chat. So thank you all and bye. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Hopefully it was well.
Oh, no, it was great. There's going to be a YouTube recording as well. So you can. Proceed.